They gave me the chair with the wobbly leg, the one nobody else wanted, pushed into the corner of the dining room where the heat vent never reached. My coffee had gone cold before anyone thought to pour me a fresh cup, and by then they were already arguing about whether to repaint the porch I painted myself the summer my husband died. I didn't say a word. I sat there with both hands around that cold mug, looking at the table I'd bought with my first real paycheck in 1971, and I thought, not unkindly, that they had no idea who they were dealing with. My name is Marin. I'm 68 years old, and for the last 14 months, I had been a guest in my own house. It started the way these things always start, with a phone call and a soft voice and a problem that wasn't mine to fix. My daughter-in-law had lost her job at the dental office, and my son had taken a pay cut, and the apartment they rented out by the highway had gone up again the way everything goes up now. "Just until we get on our feet," she'd said. 3 months, maybe 4. I said yes before she finished asking. Of course I said yes. He's my boy. The little girl, my granddaughter, was only 9, and I couldn't stand the thought of her doing homework in a car, so they came. A U-Haul on a Sunday in August. Boxes stacked in my living room like a fort, and my son hugging me in the driveway and saying, "Ma, you're a lifesaver. You really are." I believed him. I wanted to. The first month was fine. Better than fine. The house had been so quiet since Walt passed that the noise felt like a gift. My granddaughter Posey would climb into my lap and ask me to read the same book about a lost mitten over and over, and I'd do all the voices, and she'd laugh like it was the first time every time. My son cut the grass without being asked. His wife cooked a roast on Sundays. I thought, this is what I missed. This is what a house is for. I don't know exactly when it turned. That's the thing about these slow erosions. There's no single day you can point to. It happens the way a riverbank gives way, one grain at a time, until one morning the tree that stood there your whole life is just gone. First it was the den, my sewing room, where I kept my machine and my fabric and the rocker Walt built for me when we were first married. They needed an office, his wife said, for her online classes. Just for a while. So we moved my machine to the basement by the water heater, where the light was bad and the damp got into the thread. I didn't mind, I told myself. I wasn't sewing much anymore anyway. Then it was the good dishes, then the linens. Then the closet in the hall where I kept the Christmas things, cleared out one afternoon while I was at my doctor's appointment. My boxes of ornaments stacked in the garage where the squirrels could get at them. When I asked about it, my daughter-in-law looked at me with this patient, tired expression, the kind you'd give a child who keeps asking the same question, and she said, "Marin, we talked about this." We didn't. We never did. But I was starting to learn that whatever she said had happened was what had happened, and whatever I remembered was just me getting confused again. That was the worst part. Not the dishes, not the den. It was the slow, careful way they began to treat me like I was disappearing. She started leaving notes. Little squares of yellow paper stuck to everything. "Please rinse before putting in dishwasher. Thermostat stays at 68. Do not let the dog on the couch. The dog was mine. Walt and I had picked him out together, a scruffy old terrier named Biscuit. And now there was a note telling me how to live with my own dog in my own living room. The notes always said, we've decided, we think it's best, as if I were a problem the household had convened to manage. My son stopped meeting my eyes. That hurt more than I'll ever be able to put into words. He'd walk through a room I was sitting in and not see me, his thumb scrolling, his mouth set in that distracted line his father used to get. When his wife spoke, he nodded. When I spoke, he'd say, "In a minute, Ma," and the minute never came. There was a night in February I keep coming back to. I'd made myself a cup of tea and gone to sit in the living room in Walt's old recliner, the one piece of furniture they hadn't claimed yet. And my daughter-in-law came in and stood there for a moment, and then she said, very gently, very reasonably, "You know, Marin, that chair really is the best one for John's back. He's on his feet all day. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the bedroom anyway with your shows." I got up, I took my tea, and I went to my room, and I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, and I did not cry, because I had used up most of my crying on Walt, and there wasn't much left. But I sat there a long time, and I thought about the word comfortable. How she used it like a kindness, when what she meant was out of the way. The next morning, the recliner had a new throw blanket on it that wasn't mine, and that was that. I want to be honest about something. Because I've thought about it a great deal since. I let it happen. The comments online when this all came out later, some of them were cruel about it. Why did you wait? Why didn't you throw them out the first week? What kind of doormat lets her own son do this? And I understand the anger, I do. But I want to tell you what it's actually like when it's your own child. You don't see it as a takeover. You see it as helping. Every single concession feels small and reasonable in the moment. Of course he can use the den. He's trying to better himself. Of course I'll keep the thermostat low. Money's tight. You tell yourself you're being a good mother. You tell yourself that love means making room. And by the time you understand that there is no version of this where they make room back for you, you're already sleeping in the smallest bedroom, eating last, asking permission to use your own washing machine. You don't notice the water rising because you're the one who's drowning, and drowning is quiet. It doesn't look like anything from the outside. And there's the other thing, the thing I'm most ashamed of. I was afraid that if I made a fuss, he'd leave and take Posy with him, and I'd never see her again. So I swallowed it. Every plate of cold dinner. Every note. Every note. Every minute that never came. What finally turned me wasn't the den or the dog or the recliner. It was a school form. It was a Tuesday in March. Posy came home from school with a flyer about a grandparents' day breakfast, and she'd circled it in purple marker and drawn a little arrow pointing to my name, which she'd written herself in her careful 9-year-old letters. Grandma Marin. She tugged my sleeve at the kitchen table and asked in a whisper, like it was a secret, "Will you come?" And before I could even answer, her mother reached over and slid the flyer away and said, "We'll see, honey. Grandma gets confused at busy places, remember? We don't want her to have one of her spells." I don't have spells. I have never had a spell in my life. My blood pressure is good. My mind is clear. The only thing I forget is where I put my reading glasses, same as everyone. But Posy nodded and looked at me with this little flicker of worry, like maybe it was true, like maybe her grandmother was someone to be worried about. And I watched my granddaughters start to believe the story they were telling about me. That was the drop that did it, not for me. I could have gone on absorbing it forever, the way you can stand a low ache for years. But I would not let them write me out of that child's understanding of who I was. I would not become, in her memory, the confused old woman they had to manage. So that night, after the house had gone dark, I got down on my knees in my closet and pulled out the fireproof box I keep at the back, under the shoebox of Walt's letters. My hands were steady. I want you to know that. After 14 months of being told I was losing my grip, my hands did not shake at all. Inside the box was everything. The deed to the house, free and clear, paid off in 2009. My name and Walt's, and after Walt, just mine. The property tax records I'd paid out of my own account every single year, including the 14 months they'd lived under my roof. The homeowner's insurance, my name on the policy. And Walt's will, where he'd left everything to me, plain as day, with a line he'd insisted the lawyer add, even though the lawyer said it was unnecessary, to my wife Marin, who built this home with her own 2 hands, to do with as she sees fit, and no one else. I sat on the closet floor and read it all by the light of my phone, and I felt something come back into me that had been gone so long I'd forgotten its name. It wasn't anger. It was clearer than anger. It was the simple, settled fact of the truth. This was my house, not ours. Mine. I had signed for it. I had paid for it. I had buried my husband from it, and I would, God willing, be carried out of it myself one day, but until then, it was mine. I didn't do anything dramatic. I want to be clear about that because I know that's not the satisfying part. I didn't flip a table or scream. I'm 68, and I've learned that the loudest people in the room are usually the ones with the weakest hand. Instead, the next morning, I got up before any of them. I made a full pot of coffee, the good kind, and I poured myself a cup in my own kitchen, in the best mug, and I sat down at the head of the table, Walt's old seat, which had become my son's seat sometime in the last year without anyone discussing it. And I waited. My daughter-in-law came down first. She stopped when she saw me there. Her eyes went to the mug, to the chair, to my face, and something passed over her. Some animal recognition that the weather had changed. "You're up early," she said. "I have an appointment," I told her, "with a man named Edward Pruitt. He's an attorney. I made it last week." She laughed a little, the way she did, the laugh that was meant to make you feel foolish for being serious. An attorney. "For what, Marin?" For my house, I said. I'd like everyone at the table this morning before John leaves for work. There are some things we never actually talked about, and I'd like to talk about them now. I practiced saying it without my voice wobbling, and it didn't wobble. She went and got my son. He came down in his work clothes, irritated, glancing at his watch, and his wife stood behind him with her arms crossed, and Posy hovered in the doorway in her pajamas, sensing the way children always sense it, that the air had gone strange. I asked Posy to go upstairs and pick out her outfit for picture day, which was Thursday, and she went, because she trusts me, and because some part of me did not want her to watch this. Then I put the folder on the table. I didn't shove it at them. I just set it down and opened it, and I laid out the pages one at a time, the way you deal cards, slow enough for them to read the headings. This is the deed, I said. This is the will. These are 14 years of tax receipts, and these are the last 14 months, which I paid, every dollar, while you paid me nothing. I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying it because somewhere along the way you both decided this was your house, and I was your tenant, and I let you believe it, and that was my mistake. I'm correcting it now. My son's face did something I'd never seen it do. He looked, for just a second, like the boy who'd scratched his name under the table, caught and ashamed. Then his wife put her hand on his arm, and the boy went away, and the man came back. And the man said, "Ma, you can't just throw us out. We have a child. Where are we supposed to go?" And there it was. The thing they'd been counting on without ever saying it. That I loved them too much to do what they would have done to a stranger in a heartbeat. "I'm not throwing anyone out," I said. "I am telling you that this is my home, and from this morning forward, you are going to live in it like guests in someone's home, which means with respect. The notes come down today. My sewing room comes back. The dog gets on whatever couch he likes. I sit where I please. And you will speak to me, both of you, like I am the woman who took you in, not a burden you got stuck with." And I said, and this was the part I'd lain awake deciding, "You are going to start paying rent. Fair rent. Not because I need the money, though I'll be putting every cent of it into an account for Posy's education, but because a person who pays their way stands up straighter, and because you have taught my granddaughter that her grandmother is a problem, and I am going to spend however many years I have left teaching her otherwise." My daughter-in-law's mouth opened, and I held up my hand, and to my own surprise, she stopped. "You're free to go," I told them. "I'd understand it if you did. But if you stay, it's on these terms, and there's a paper for that too, a lease, and Mr. Pruitt is drawing it up this morning. You have until the 1st of the month to decide." The kitchen was very quiet. The fridge hummed. Somewhere upstairs, Posy was singing to herself, off-key, happy, the way a child sings when the adults haven't ruined the morning yet. They didn't leave. I'll tell you that because people always want to know. They thought about it, I'm sure. But the truth was they had nowhere better to go, and underneath everything, I think my son knew he had done a wrong he wanted a chance to undo. They signed the lease. The notes came down. My machine came up from the basement, and Walt's rocker came back to the corner by the window where the afternoon light is good. It wasn't a fairy tale. My daughter-in-law and I will never be close. There's a coldness there that money can't thaw, and I've stopped trying. But she calls me Mary now without the little laugh, and that's something. And my son slowly came back to me. It took months. One night in summer he sat down across from me after the others had gone to bed, and he said, "Ma, I don't know when I stopped seeing you." And I told him the truth, that I didn't know either, but that I'd been right here the whole time, waiting for him to look. The thing I think about most, though, is Posy. Because here's what I learned, sitting on that closet floor with the deed in my hands. A house is just walls. They can take your den and your dishes and your good chair, and they can leave you eating cold dinner in the corner, and none of it is really the loss. The loss is when they take your place in the story. When the people you'd give your life for start to believe you're someone smaller than you are. I went to the grandparents' breakfast that March. I sat in a tiny plastic chair at a tiny table and ate a rubbery pancake, and Posy held my hand the whole time and introduced me to her teacher as my grandma. She built her own house, and the pride in her voice was worth more than the deed and the will and every dollar of rent combined. She's 12 now. She comes and sews with me on Saturdays in the room with the good light, and she's getting better than I ever was. The other day, she finished a little quilted mitten, a joke between us from the book I used to read her, and she gave it to me and said, "So you don't forget," and I laughed because we both know I never forgot anything. I just had to remember to stand up. I've had a long time to sit in the good light of my sewing room and ask myself how it ever got that far. The honest answer is that it didn't happen to me all at once. It happened the way a floor rots under a rug, one quiet season at a time, and every single concession I made felt like love while I was making it. That's the part I want anyone watching to really hear. The day they moved the recliner, the day the notes went up, the day my own dog needed permission to sit on my own couch. None of those days announced themselves as the day my home stopped being mine. I gave it away in pieces, telling myself a good mother makes room, and a house given away in pieces is just as gone as one taken all at once. What pulled me back wasn't luck, and it wasn't a miracle. It was a box at the back of a closet and the plain truth inside it. I think people watch a story like mine hoping for a rescuer, but no one was coming for me. The deed had my name on it the whole 14 months I was eating cold dinner in the corner. The power had been mine all along. I had just forgotten I was allowed to use it. There's a kind of knowing that matters more than being clever. It's the patience to learn exactly where you stand before you ever open your mouth. I didn't shout. I gathered my papers, I made one phone call to Edward Pruitt, and I let the facts do the work that angered never could. But knowing where you stand only counts if you find the spine to act on it, and that took me longer than I'll ever be proud of. I was afraid of losing Posey, so I let them shrink me down to the confused old woman they needed me to be. The moment I stopped trading my dignity for their comfort was the moment everything turned, and the cause of that turn wasn't them softening. It was me deciding I would no longer help them lie about who I was. Nothing in my life rewarded me for staying silent. The instant I stood up straight, the whole house rearranged itself around the truth. And there's a last thing, the thing Walt would have wanted me to say. Standing up for yourself is not the opposite of love. I could have kept my house and lost my son, but I held the line in a way that left a door open. Rent that built Posey's future. Terms that asked them to grow instead of just go. Strength without decency is only cruelty wearing a brave face. So if you take anything from an old woman in a wobbly chair, take this. Learn the ground you stand on. Find the nerve to stand on it, and never let the standing turn you hard. I waited too long. Don't wait the way I waited. The people you love most are sometimes the very ones counting on you to disappear quietly, and the kindest, bravest thing you can do for all of you is refuse.